Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a place so weird and uncomfortable you might want to go check your pantry for snacks just to be sure you're not dreaming. That's right, we're diving deep into the medieval world of inns, but not the cozy, fireplace and warm bread kind. I mean the grimy, stinky, your blanket is made out of mystery fabric kind of inns. Picture yourself in the Middle Ages, surrounded by the smell of unwashed peasants, spoiled food, and, oh, did I mention the rats? But before we get all medieval on you, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Seriously, no pressure. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. It's always 2 a.m. somewhere, right? Now dim the lights, turn on your fan for that soft, calming hum, and make yourself comfy. Maybe tuck your feet in, because we're about to enter a world where shoes were a luxury and cleanliness was a fairy tale. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what life was like for a peasant trying to make a living in a medieval inn? How did they survive? What was the food like? Could you even trust that your drink wasn't mixed with something unspeakable? How did people live with no indoor plumbing? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in the 14th century. The year is 1347, and everything's about to go hilariously sideways. It's dawn, and you've already started the day with a loud groan because, well, you woke up on the floor of a medieval inn. Not a bed, just a pile of hay that may or may not be alive. Your stomach growls in protest, but guess what? Breakfast is not a thing. Instead, you're greeted with a stale crust of bread, and if you're lucky, maybe some cheese that's older than your grandmother's knitting needles. But hey, at least you've survived another night. Do you wish you could wake up to a warm croissant and a latte? Too bad. This is 1347, and your breakfast choices are as questionable as the hygiene standards. But let's get real. Have you ever tried to survive on a hunk of moldy bread while praying to God it doesn't make you sick? And yet, somehow, it's the most exciting part of your day. You're not alone in this misery. You share your morning with the other lucky folks who also woke up on the floor, groggy from a night filled with odd smells, questionable snoring, and the occasional rats scurrying over your feet. There's no coffee waiting for you. Forget about those cozy mornings you've read about in magazines, where you sip a perfectly brewed cup of something called latte art. Here, your morning starts with a bitter, unidentifiable liquid that could be coffee, but more likely resembles the contents of the bottom of a mud puddle. It's cold, it's bitter, and if you're lucky, you don't have to sip through a layer of something suspiciously gelatinous. But hey, it's better than nothing, right? As the innkeeper ambles by, he shoots you a half-hearted look of sympathy, mostly because he's got a headache from last night's debauchery and hasn't even attempted a wash since last week. The morning is spent trying to shake off that heavy, groggy feeling that clings to your bones like damp clothes. But there's no time for idleness in this world. You stumble into the courtyard, where the air smells faintly of wet hay, sweat, and the lingering stench of someone else's boots. You start your workday, which involves a lot of lifting, toiling, and hoping that someone will offer you something more than a crust of stale bread by midday. The inn itself looks exactly as you'd expect. A ramshackle mess of mismatched stones, patched up walls, and a roof that's probably ready to cave in. The noble guests who will come through in the evening might never notice the cracks in the walls or the fact that the wooden floorboards squeak in protest with every step. but you're keenly aware of them. When you get your first real meal of the day, assuming that mysterious stew counts, you realize just how lucky you are. The stew, made with whatever was scavenged from the inn's kitchen, is warm at least, though it tastes like something that's been cooked 3 times over. A bit more salt, you think to yourself. But what's the point? Salt's probably been hoarded by the nobles. They don't care about your salt cravings. They care about their lavish banquets and your labor. That stew might have a strange color to it, but who's going to complain? Not you. Not when the alternative is a half day of hunger. In the far corner, the innkeeper's dog is licking a pot, probably trying to finish off the last of whatever scraps were left in there. But don't worry, that dog's not too picky about what's in the bowl, and neither are you. You think about that for a second. Have you ever had to live in a world where even the dog's better fed than you? It's not glamorous, it's not pretty, it's not something you'd put on Instagram, but it's your reality. As the morning continues, you'll do some chores, all the while wondering if you'll get paid for the work, or if you'll just get another mouthful of bread and cheese. But that's fine. This is your life. And as long as you don't die from food poisoning, you're doing better than the guy who fell off the roof yesterday. There's no time to dwell on what could have been. You're lucky to be alive and have a roof over your head, no matter how many cracks it has. You've heard stories about life in the city, where the nobles feast on turkey legs, sip fine wine, and bathe in warm water. But let's be honest, no one's got time for that here. You didn't choose this life, but it's the only life you've got. Every morning is a reminder of how far you've come and how little you have. You brush the hay off your clothes, stretch your sore limbs, and get ready for another day of living on the edge of survival, wondering what the rest of the world is doing. But don't worry. At least you've survived the morning, and that's something to be proud of, right? As you stagger to your feet, the inn begins to come alive, but don't get too excited. This place is like a combination of a bad reality show and an escape room you didn't sign up for. The air smells like a mix of fermented meat, burning wood, and something you really don't want to identify. The floorboards creak beneath you as rats scurry in every direction. But don't worry, they're probably more scared of you than you are of them. Probably. The tavern keeper greets you with a smile, though it's hard to tell if he's actually smiling or just grimacing from the smell. Welcome to your new home for the night, where your closest companions are rats, mud, and maybe, just maybe, a few coins you can trade for a drink that'll make you forget you're here. You try to steady yourself, but the floor feels like it's alive too. Slippery with something that might be spilled beer, mud, or possibly something else. Whatever it is, it's probably been there for longer than you'd care to know. The light is dim, flickering in a way that's not quite comforting, more like an ominous reminder that if you're here too long, you'll start to blend into the walls, or worse, the muck. A few drunken patrons sit at the far corner, their faces flushed and their words slurred, looking like they've just completed a marathon of bad decisions. Somewhere in the distance, a lute is strummed, but it's more of a background hum, like a mosquito you can't quite get rid of. It's not music, it's noise, and yet it's the highlight of your evening. The rats are everywhere. They dart between your feet, scuttling across the floor with a speed that's almost impressive, except for the fact that you're not entirely sure whether they're after the spilled food, or if they're simply living here now. You step cautiously, unsure whether to trust the ground beneath you. it's probably best to move slowly, especially when you're trying to avoid stepping on something you'll regret for the next few weeks. At least the rats seem to be doing better than you. They're quick, agile, and appear completely unbothered by the chaos of their surroundings. You'd almost envy their ability to adapt to this medieval hellscape. The tavern keeper, in his dirt-smeared apron, ambles over to you. He offers you something that might be a smile, though it looks more like a grimace of someone who spent too many years with this exact same job, living in this exact same place. You wonder if he has any idea what it's like to work anywhere else, or if this is just his lot in life. He mumbles something unintelligible, but it's clear he's offering you the drink that'll help numb your senses for the night. You take it without hesitation, because really, what else can you do? If you're going to survive here, it's probably better to be a little numb to it all. The drink doesn't help much, of course. It's probably watered-down wine, or maybe some sort of strange concoction they call ale. But honestly, at this point, you're just glad it's liquid. The taste is, well, let's say it's not a flavor you'll soon forget, but it's a flavor that helps you forget your situation. You take another gulp, trying not to choke on it, and look around. The fire flickers on the hearth, casting shadows that make the place feel even more claustrophobic than it already is. You notice a man in the corner, his face so red and sweaty, it looks like he might combust at any moment. Another moment, and he's passed out, face first on the table, drooling into his soup. No one notices, no one cares. It's just another night at the inn. A loud crash comes from the kitchen, probably another pot falling to the floor, but you can't be sure. You take another sip of your drink. Everything smells worse with every breath you take, but that's life in the medieval world. There are no filters, no air fresheners, no candles that will mask the scent of stale food, unwashed bodies, and desperation. This is survival. This is what life is like when you have no choice but to endure the unpleasant, the unbearable, and the downright disgusting. But at least you think to yourself, there's a certain charm to it. The charm of rats scurrying across the floor, the charm of the tavern keeper who looks like he's about to collapse from exhaustion, and the charm of living in a place where the most exciting thing happening is the drunken laughter of strangers who will forget you by morning. And as you sit there, surrounded by the unrelenting stench, the half-drunken patrons and the rats that seem more like family than pests, you realize you're not leaving anytime soon. This is your life now. But hey, you're still alive, aren't you? And for all its flaws, that's something to be proud of in this lovely little inn of horrors. Ah, yes, lunch. Or as it's known in the medieval world, a thing that might be food. What's for lunch, you ask? You're given a bowl of something so unidentifiable, it might as well be called mystery stew. It's probably made of whatever was left from the butcher, or worse, the leftovers from yesterday's feast. The texture is like chewed leather, and the flavor, well, let's just say, it's a little like licking a stone that's been marinating in the rain for 3 weeks. This is the food that fuels a medieval peasant. And while you're eating, the innkeeper keeps a close eye on you, just in case you decide to leave without paying. Because in the Middle Ages, there's no such thing as a free meal, even if the meal is absolutely free of any discernible nutrition. The stew, a color that could generously be described as muddy brown, sits in front of you like an uninvited guest at a party, just waiting to make you uncomfortable. There's a thick, unsettling smell wafting from the bowl. An aroma that's a strange mix of overripe vegetables and something faintly metallic. You poke it with a spoon, wondering if it'll be edible, but you're too far gone at this point. You take a bite, praying to whatever gods are still listening that it won't kill you. The texture is like chewing through old boot leather, tough and stubborn, refusing to break down. It's the kind of food that feels like it could use a few hours of tenderizing, but sadly, it's already too late. You chew, slowly, as if trying to convince your mouth it's okay to swallow. The flavor isn't exactly offensive, but it's certainly not what you'd call good. It's the taste of something that's been buried under a pile of scraps for a while. But here's the thing. This is a luxury. The fact that you have any food at all is a privilege. You take another bite because there's really nothing else to do, and you wonder how many other poor souls have had to eat this very stew for generations. You look around the room, and there's a kind of solidarity in the air. Everyone's doing the same thing, pushing through. Maybe, just maybe, tomorrow the stew will taste a little less like a punishment. The bread, if you can call it that, sits beside the stew. It's hard, dry, and the kind of thing that could double as a weapon if you're in a fight. You take a bite, but it's more of a chew and swallow situation. There's no joy in it, just necessity. You need something to go with the stew, something to sop it up and make sure the last of it doesn't go to waste. It's not that you like it, it's that you have no choice. Your body, as used to deprivation as it is, accepts the bread as a survival tool. If only there were butter or maybe a bit of cheese or something. But no, this is it. This is the food that will carry you through the day. The peasants around you seem unbothered. They've all eaten the same thing, day in and day out. This is the rhythm of their lives. Their stomachs accustomed to the torture of something barely edible. The worst part? You're not even sure what the stew is anymore. There might be a bit of beef or mutton in there, but it's hard to tell. The innkeeper insists it's fresh, but you suspect the term is being used in a very generous sense. Maybe it was fresh a week ago, but by now it's probably best not to ask too many questions. You know better than to inquire about ingredients when your meal looks like it's been through the worst of the food chain. You take another sip of your watery drink, wondering if this is what life was always going to be like. Was it always going to be about scraping by, eating whatever scraps were thrown your way and pretending it's fine? Well, it has to be. There's no other choice. As you finish the last of the stew, a nagging thought crosses your mind. Did anyone else notice the rat that just darted past the kitchen? Nah, you think. It's probably just one of the local guests. The innkeeper probably knows them by name by now. The sound of scraping bowls fills the room, the rhythm of half-empty stomachs trying to settle. And you, for a brief moment, can almost forget how unpleasant this whole process is. It's like a sad ritual, one that gets you through another day, another meal, another slog through the gruel that is medieval survival. But what else is there to do? As you leave the table, you catch the innkeeper's eye again. He looks at you, half smiling, half grimacing, probably thinking the same thing you are. At least you didn't die, he seems to be saying with his expression. That's the motto of the medieval world. If you didn't die from your meal, you've won the day. Small victories, right? At least for now, you've made it. You're still here, still breathing, still living on whatever questionable scraps you've managed to get your hands on. And maybe, just maybe, That's enough to get you through another day. Now, let's talk hygiene. Or rather, let's not talk about it, because there's really nothing to discuss. When it's time to clean up, you're faced with the terrifying realization that there's no soap, no shampoo, and definitely no hot water. The closest thing to a bath is the rinse off in the river and pray it does the trick method. You stand in the river, hoping that whatever's floating by won't make contact with you. Spoiler, it will. But hey, your body might not be clean, but at least you've developed a thick skin, both literally and figuratively. Ever tried washing off the grime of the day with freezing cold water and the smell of sewage? Yeah, it's just like that. The river, though, is your only option. There's no such thing as me time in the medieval world, especially when it comes to personal hygiene. So, you stand there in the water, maybe up to your knees, maybe deeper depending on how much you're willing to risk. The cold is brutal, freezing even, and you can feel it creeping up your legs as you desperately try to scrub away the day's filth. But scrubbing isn't really an option when your soap is actually just dirt and a bit of river grit you hope might somehow do the job. The stench is relentless. It's not just sweat and the smells of the day's labor, it's a whole mix of things. Dust, animal manure, and the lingering odor of an unwashed body that's been trapped in the same clothes for days. But this is all you have. This is how you freshen up. As you scrub, your thoughts begin to wander. Is anyone really clean, or are we all just kidding ourselves? You've heard the stories. Nobles with their golden tubs and scented oils. But that's for the rich, not someone like you. The idea of a hot bath is like a dream, a luxury only reserved for those with the wealth to afford it. So instead, you stand there, chipping away at your grime with the most basic of tools, your own hands and the bitter, cold river. It's as effective as trying to clean your house with a broom made of wet sticks, meaning it's not really doing anything but spreading the dirt around a little more. The water is murky, of course. You glance down and see a few weeds drifting by, maybe a dead fish or two. The river's not exactly pristine, but it's the best option you've got. That's the thing about life in the medieval world. It's not about being clean, it's about surviving. And if surviving means accepting that your hair will remain oily for weeks, and your body will be a constant mix of dust, sweat, and river water, then so be it. There's no use in complaining. After all, who would listen? Everyone's in the same boat. The innkeeper? Covered in the same grime, though probably a bit more comfortable in his filth. The other peasants? They're probably standing in the river right next to you, doing the same thing, with the same look of resignation on their faces. You take a moment to breathe, wondering if this is the moment where you, too, will just give up and let it all go. But no, there's no time for that. The river waits for no one, and neither does the rest of the world. It's cold, it's uncomfortable, and it's far from glamorous, but at least it's a ritual. A daily reminder that you're alive, and that's worth something. Your skin, despite the lack of proper care, has toughened over the years. The cold doesn't bother you as much as it used to. The dirt, too, has become familiar, a part of you that no amount of scrubbing could ever really remove. It's as much a part of the medieval experience as the stink of your neighbor's poorly ventilated hut. As you finish, you take a long, deep breath. It's still freezing. The river still smells terrible. But you're done. You survived another round of bathing in medieval times. What else can you do but accept that this is the way things are? The days of warm, bubbly baths and fresh towels seem as distant as the kingdom's farthest border. But that's okay. You've made it through. And with that cold, murky water, you've at least managed to wash away some of the dirt of the day. It might not have been the most efficient method, and it certainly wasn't pleasant, but it was the only method, and that's the most medieval thing about it. As the evening sets in, you join the other patrons of the inn for a night of entertainment, which, in medieval terms, means getting really drunk and maybe listening to someone poorly strum a lute. The music is terrible, the laughter is forced, and the tavern smells like the inside of an old boot. But hey, it's the highlight of your day. At least you're not being dragged off to the Lord's Manor to work the fields in the freezing cold. Still, it's hard to forget that you're surrounded by people who are equally miserable and just as drunk as you are. If you were to pass out right now, no one would notice until morning. And by then, you'll have the chance to wake up with a hangover and zero sense of dignity. The innkeeper, probably also half drunk at this point, sloshes some more cheap wine into your mug. It's the same drink you've had all day, the kind that burns all the way down, not because it's strong, but because it tastes like it was fermented with whatever scraps the kitchen couldn't sell. You take a swig just to blend in. You can feel it slowly numbing your senses, which is exactly what you need. After all, when your choices are a miserable existence in a freezing, rat-infested inn, or losing yourself in a room full of equally miserable souls, the latter is looking pretty good. The noise picks up as the lute player hits another note that's just a bit too sharp, and the room erupts into forced laughter. You join in, not because it's funny, but because it's expected. No one's really laughing. It's just the sound of people trying to forget they're all stuck in the same miserable place, doing the same miserable thing. Across the room, a man stumbles onto the table, face first into his own stew, and no one bats an eye. He's probably been here too long, same as you, and when you wake up tomorrow, he'll still be here, just a little bit closer to his own personal rock bottom. Everyone in the room has a look of weary acceptance on their faces, like they've all come to terms with their sorry existence. There's no escape, no way out. Just tonight, just this bottle of sour wine, and whatever rambling chatter the drunk musicians can muster. Somewhere, a man is shouting about how great his last conquest was, but you know better than to listen to that nonsense. The only thing you can conquer right now is how long you can keep your eyes open before the inevitable descent into drunken stupor. The fire crackles in the corner, but it's doing little to warm the room. Instead, it gives off a smoky smell that mingles with the thick, damp air. The patrons around you look like they've been stuck here for days, weeks even, with no hope of escaping. A young man, his tunic stained with what might be blood or simply an unidentifiable substance, offers a toast. He raises his mug high, eyes glistening with a mix of desperation and enthusiasm. The crowd follows suit, clinking their mugs together, the sound dull and flat. To surviving, the young man shouts, and everyone repeats after him, not because they mean it, but because it's the best toast they can come up with. At this point, surviving is the best anyone can hope for. You raise your own mug, nodding along with the rest of them. But deep down, you know that the toast isn't for survival. It's a call for oblivion, a cry for anything to take the edge off this never-ending, back-breaking existence. The lute player hits another jarring note, and for a second, you wonder why you even bothered to get out of bed today. But then you think, why not? What else is there? At least you're still alive. At least you're still here, amidst this room full of people who share your misery, drinking cheap wine and listening to a tune that might just be the worst sound in the world. You lean back in your chair, the rough wood digging into your back. If you could, you'd just slip away into unconsciousness. But no, you're stuck here, stuck with these strangers, stuck with the miserable sound of the lute and the smell of old beer and burnt food. For now, the best you can do is drink a little more, nod a little slower, and try not to think too hard about the day that's been. Eventually, the light from the fire flickers and dims. The patrons' voices become a low hum in the background. Maybe you've had enough. Maybe you just want to crawl under the table and sleep through this nightmare. But that's the thing about nights like these. You can't escape. You can only survive. And somehow, by the time you finish your drink, that's all you need to do. Just survive. Until tomorrow. Until the next miserable round of forced entertainment and numbing drinks. But for now, at least you're not the one passed out in his stew. Not yet. Finally, you collapse into your hay-filled bed for the night, praying for sleep. Though it's hard to come by when every inch of your body itches from the fleas, and you're pretty sure the walls are crawling with something. The darkness outside is thick with the sounds of the night. Howling wolves, drunk peasants, and the occasional scream of someone who's definitely not sleeping well. As you settle into a restless slumber, you realize that tomorrow is just going to be more of the same. But that's okay, because in the medieval world, you've learned to survive on very little, except, of course, for rats, dirt, and whatever passed for entertainment at the local inn. The hay beneath you feels as though it might be the most uncomfortable thing you've ever slept on. But then again, that's saying something. You've slept on floors that were harder than the stone walls surrounding this place, on straw that smelled worse than a goat's breath, and even in hay that's so old it probably remembers the last time someone even attempted to clean it. The straw pokes through the thin fabric of your tunic, digging into your skin. Your body aches from the day's labor, and now this. But hey, you're used to it, right? It's just part of life. The discomfort, the constant itching, the realization that you'll probably wake up with something crawling across your face. There's no such thing as a peaceful night here. Outside, the sounds of the night get louder. The wind howls, rattling the shutters on the inn, and you hear the distant growls of wolves in the forest. It's an eerie, unsettling noise, but you know better than to let it worry you. The wolves are probably more interested in whatever they can catch than the fact that you're lying awake in a room full of people who are equally miserable. Every so often, you hear the sound of a drunken peasant stumbling through the inn, shouting incoherently or laughing at something no one else seems to find funny. It's the kind of laughter that's more out of desperation than anything else, and it seems to echo in the cold stone walls, making the night feel longer than it already is. You shift in your bed, trying to find a more comfortable spot, but it's hopeless. The hay is compacted under you, the fleas are multiplying by the second, and you're fairly certain something just scurried across your foot. You try not to think about it, but it's hard to ignore the reality of your situation. This is life now. This is what you've come to expect. In a way, it's almost comforting. You know exactly what's coming. You know that no matter how miserable you feel tonight, tomorrow will be just the same. More work, more discomfort, more grim acceptance that there's nothing you can do to change it. In the distance, you hear the unmistakable sound of someone else yelling in their sleep, probably having a nightmare, probably reliving a day much like yours, where the only hope is to make it to the next. You can't help but wonder, will anyone ever be happy here? Will anyone ever be able to rest without the knowledge that tomorrow brings nothing but the same relentless cycle? Probably not. But you're here, and you're alive. And that's about as good as it gets in a place like this. As you settle into the restless slumber that has become your new normal, you realize that you're not alone in this. Everyone else in the inn is likely suffering the same fate, fighting off sleep in a room full of fleas, rats, and the strange, unsettling noises of the night. Somewhere, someone is probably struggling with the same discomfort, the same feeling of not being able to escape. But in the medieval world, that's just part of the deal. You survive, you endure, and you keep going, no matter how miserable it gets. Eventually, the darkness becomes your only friend. The cold, empty night stretches on, and you're left with the strange comfort of knowing that this too shall pass. Tomorrow, you'll wake up to more of the same, more aching limbs, more uncertainty, and more suffering. But for now, you drift off, knowing that somehow you'll survive it. Because that's what people like you do. You survive. And in a world where survival is everything, that's as much as anyone can hope for. And so, you drift into an uneasy sleep, the howling wolves outside becoming just another part of the night, blending into the symphony of discomfort that is your life. So tonight, as you tuck into your clean bed with hot water, soft pillows, and indoor plumbing, remember the people of the past who didn't have it nearly so easy. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How something as simple as a warm shower or a soft mattress can feel like an absolute luxury when you think back to how things used to be. The medieval world was full of hardship, discomfort, and uncertainty, but somehow they survived. The peasants, the innkeepers, the travelers, they all kept going day after day through the stench, the grime, and the exhaustion. And while they might not have had the comfort of modern life, they had something else, an incredible resilience, a stubbornness that kept them alive in the face of it all. So as you close your eyes tonight, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to those who endured the things you'll never have to experience. They fought against lice, leeches, and a constant sense of misery that we can hardly imagine. And they did it without the hope of a soft blanket or a fresh change of clothes. They survived because they had no other choice, and somehow they still found a way to laugh, to drink, and to live, even in the most miserable conditions. Because history may be gross and terrifying, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and kind of ridiculous. They made it through, just like you will, despite everything. So sleep well, knowing that tomorrow you'll wake up in a world far more comfortable, far more forgiving than the one they knew. And maybe, just maybe, we've earned the right to appreciate those little comforts a little bit more. Good night, and remember, tomorrow's another day, but at least you're not waking up in a hay-filled bed surrounded by rats.